putting this whole thing together. It was kind of our first in-person talk, in real life meeting. And we were trying to figure out what's the angle. And it was like, a lot of it was just like kind of getting back together again, but also coming back from kind of being beat up by the industry for a long time. And the pandemic was kind of a hard reset for us and really take stock about the choices we were making and why we were doing what we were doing. So Michelle came up with this idea for this, like, hey, I want you to talk to the Great Resignation. Like, look, I've been living that my entire life. Anyway, so this started out as one kind of talk, and I was kind of, and then it got personal and turned into something else, and I kind of ran it by, I kind of workshopped it with a few people I knew. I ran it by Adrienne, and it turned into something a little more personal. So I'm just going to get started with it. So I'm no Nate Silver. I'm not a research scientist. I was curious about this, and Michelle asked me to get into it. I was like, well, okay, let me get back to the source. I love finding out where these things, where does this word come from? And so here's our guy, Anthony C. Klotz. He's professor at Texas A&M Business School, and he's the first guy who called it the Great Resignation. And of course, the press picked up on it. Now we have what we have, and it's become a media cycle, and it's become a thing. But that's the guy. So now, the next time you're at a party and somebody asks, now you know, right? So here's a shocking fact. 33 million Americans have left their jobs since January 21. And I know that's a year ago, but like this is like, what I'm trying to do is kind of set the stage for what we're talking about overall here. And the numbers kind of come from where you would expect them to come from. Leisure and hospitality. Guess what? People don't like getting paid $8 an hour to have people yell at them. Right? Shocking, right? The average quit rate, it was right there about 3%. And people in the federal and state government are not going anywhere because they love their jobs and whatever, right? But I just love getting into the numbers of where these things are coming from. Can everybody hear okay? Am I talking into the mic? Good, okay. So, and here's another shocker. Retail workers are quitting at record rates for higher paying work. My life isn't worth that shitty job. Yeah, right? I mean, come on, right? Like, so this is where things kind of got interesting for me when I started really getting into the numbers. It's like, okay, so the recession, obviously people are hanging onto their jobs. Latest facts, never about 3%. But if you look, that's pretty high, but still it's been bad before, right? And in fact, what I found out is that people are leaving their jobs, but they're not necessarily happy with where they're going. And so what this is telling me is that people are using the pandemic as a reset, but they're also looking for meaning. They're looking for something, some place new to do what they want to do, and that has meaning, that gives them meaning in their life. And that kind of became the theme of where this talk ultimately went for me. So, yeah, right? So that's at the Kinko's. It was up on 23rd and Lovejoy. If anybody's from Portland, you know where that was, right? I think it's a Chase Bank now, but that's, when I was coming up in the Portland scene, I was in bands, after I got out of high school, I played in rock bands. And everybody had this shitty McJob that they worked at. Everybody in bands had a McJob, some kind of job where they could, work during the day and then, buy drum heads and beer and pizza at night. And so Kinko's is where, one of the places I wound up working. And the reason I worked at Kinko's is because they had computers and I couldn't afford my own computer. So I could print my band posters and my CD covers, and then I could print, and I could do it all right there. So it was kind of like that was my end game to working at Kinko's. And speaking of that, here's a list of all the resignations I've given over the years.
It's not comprehensive, actually.
It's not. This is abbreviated. But I mean, so I suspect a lot of creatives, there's a lot of iteration when it comes to your career, and it definitely was with me. So my second rodeo, and I actually see some Nike people here in the room, so I have to choose my words carefully, was I walked in Nike in the early 90s with a portfolio I'd be shocked if I had 8 credit hours of college to my name at the time. But I walked in with a portfolio of rock posters and CDs and whatever else. I got hired. I called myself a walk-on at the University of Nike in the 90s. And it was a really cool experience. And Nike at the time was very entrepreneurial. There was, I think we started skate coding, is that right? There was Presto started, there's all these initiatives, and if you had it in your head that you wanted to do something, there was a group that would help you, that would help you kind of get your idea across the finish line. And so my idea was it was a reboot of Nike Sportswear, which is basically just my thought was like, you know what, Nike was doing a great job at the time of talking about innovation and pushing technology and all that stuff, but I thought they were kind of leaving a lot of cards on the table when it came to the storytelling. About where they came from. And it was a really cool story, right? It was like basically Nike was founded by a bunch of running hippies in the 60s, right? It was the anti-Adidas. But by the time, the mid to late 90s, a lot of the press they were getting was negative around, labor practices, and they were like this global hegemony. And we're like, well, wait a minute, yeah, we're big, but we still have soul. And my point with doing all this work was like, let's talk about this soul that we have, right? Let's do that through products. So keep doing your innovation. I don't want to take that away from you, but I do want to talk about kind of where this place came from. And guess what? It kind of blew up. It was a kind of a big deal for a while. And what I realized was I wasn't equipped emotionally. I don't think I had the business acumen or the political acumen to kind of keep up with the pressure of what was going on there. So the irony of it was I had never been more successful there, but I had also never been more miserable. It was a really weird feeling. I remember there was a moment towards the end where I pulled into the parking lot and I broke down. I was like, what is going on? I have this dream job that is making me cry. It was a really bizarre feeling. So I talked to my then wife at the time about it, and I was like, she knew I'd been kind of sad for a while, and she goes, well, why don't you just quit? And I was like, okay. So long story short, I called my boss and I said, you know what, I don't think there's a place for me here anymore, and I'm going to quit. And she goes, no. Before you do that, go talk to HR. You've been here a long time, you've done some great work. Let's see if we can find a better fit for you here at the org. And I was like, well, okay, but this isn't a power play. I just feel like I have nothing left here. And long story short, they said, give us 30 days, and we'll see if we can find a better fit for you here. And I was like, okay, all right. Well, long story short, it didn't end up. It didn't end well. Rather than quitting, I wound up getting fired. Right? Yeah, right. Yeah. So what's coming up now? So I was just like, oh, now what do I do, right? And the thing that made it so hard at the time, and if I think about it now, I still have a little, is like I was so all in. To me, it was almost like a mission. It was almost altruistic. Like I was like, I'm gonna show people that Nike's actually a really cool place, and these are really great people, and they're really trying to do the right thing. And to have it end the way it did just was so disillusioning to me. And it turned out to be like what a good friend of mine called one of those FGOs. Fucking growth opportunity. God damn it. It's like, right? What I did is after the blood dried and the wounds healed a little bit, I kind of went out there and explored. I went through a period of kind of exploration, like, well, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Where do I want to take what I just did? What do I want to do next? So I did a bunch of restaurant work, which I had always done. Restaurant and music work, went back to doing posters and that kind of thing. I started working with Pendleton, who I had met when I was actually working at Nike, and I wrote this brief for collaboration between Nike and Pendleton, and met with them, and they said, started working with them. Took a lot of the processes I learned about like history and storytelling and rebranded all their national park stuff, which was really cool. And this is kind of funny. They said, yeah, we're definitely put on a blanket, so we might put it on a mug, maybe a t-shirt. And well, so watch those work for hire contracts, because they're not, they don't, anyway. So anytime I go through the airport now, I see it, it always kind of makes me smile and cry at the same time. So after that, I had a good friend who used to run tennis at Nike, asked me if I wanted to be a apparel designer for tennis. And I said, well, I know how to design apparel, but I've actually never done it. Is that okay? And he said, yeah, it's fine. So I became an apparel designer. And I got to dress Milos Raonic, who was ultimately, at one point, he was number 3 in the world, and that was kind of fun. So again, here I am working for a big corporation, lots of validation. I'm flying all over the world again. That was kind of fun. I mean, right? Somewhere along the line, I started realizing, wow, I started noticing a theme. It's like I'm doing all this work for companies with logos that people recognize. And it was really, what do you do at a party? Oh yeah, I designed all the national park stuff for Pendleton. Or that t-shirt over there? Yeah, right. And it was really validating, but at the same time, it was like, God, I keep giving it, I felt like I couldn't shake the feeling that I was giving all my best work away to other companies, right? So, so I did this thing called Ore-Cal Sportswear. And Ore-Cal Sportswear was kind of my mash note to the West Coast sportswear scene, kind of growing up. Like I was born in LA. We moved when I was 10, lived in Oregon. And I just remember going to the thrift stores and seeing like Pacific Trail and Ocean Pacific and all these great outdoor brands. And it's like they had these great histories. And I thought, well, what if I made up my own brand, made up a story, fictitious, as a loving tribute to all these old brands? And so I just kind of went bananas, like what if this company had like 50 or 75 years of history? And I wanted to be so spot on that you couldn't tell it was new or was something old. Like, God, didn't I have an Ore-Cal windbreaker in high school? Wasn't that Ore-Cal? Like, I wanted it to feel like that authentic, and it worked. It was really, really cool. I made it like this. I had this whole branding thing going on, and it was really fun. And here I was again. Right now, I'm going to trade shows. I'm working. I'm getting lots of validation and lots of work. And I was like busy. And it was great. Until it wasn't. And I can laugh, and I hope you can. I hope this isn't awkward, but long story short, my dad passed away after being sick for a while. Really painful divorce. COVID, and then my mom died in the middle of all that. And it was one of those things where, what do they call it? Oh, right. Here I am again. And then I thought, God, what is going on? Why do I have to keep learning this lesson? And it really shook me. It really, really did. And I was like, well, what's going on here? And I realized what I had been doing throughout all of this, although the work was fulfilling, and it was like, I could say I was busy, and it was really easy, it was fun to brag about. I realized I was kind of on what my therapist called a hedonic treadmill, right? I just kept chasing the next big thing until, and riding it until the next thing came along. And it occurred to me, like, I thought, God, rather than actually trying to figure out what makes me really happy, I'm just chasing the next best thing. And I had this thought to myself, what if I put happiness at the top of that list rather than a cool job or travel or all these other things? What would happen if I did that? So years of therapy and talking to friends and all this stuff, I basically boiled it down for this presentation anyway to like basically three observations, takeaways that have been kind of been my thing. They might be different. Your results may vary, but kind of here's where I netted out with this. The first is this idea of ikigai. It's not your creepy uncle. It's actually it's a Japanese word for like work with meaning, meaningful work, like right. And basically, it's what I call a Zen diagram. This idea of combining like what you're good at, what the world needs, what you love, and what you can be paid for. And it's like again, like it's almost like the Marie Kondo for your life, right? Like how do we? Let's talk about how do we get like, and what this required was stopping the drinking and stopping the running around and actually like looking into the eye of the thing that's torturing you, and really like what's going on here, and really questioning what's going on. So, so here's like joking, right? Especially this guy right here, man. I say fuck at exactly the wrong time in almost every situation. So, but there's really something there, right? So I spent some time with that, and this is going to be different for everybody, and this is actually dynamic. It changes for me too, but I did realize that I actually really do love design. So everything, and I love educating, and I love human relationships, and I had these values that I realized that I was drawing from that I hadn't really clearly identified. So that was the next thing that we did, is you can't really talk about these priorities until you've talked about your values. And so one of the things, and again, talking to my therapist, he goes, hey, what if you're a cyclist or a Formula One team, what would your 4 title sponsors be? Those would be your values. And then you could have more, but what are the 4 core values you have? And so these are mine, and they change, they shift around a little bit, but the core of this is very much true. And this is part of the reason I love what Michelle's doing. What I think is so valuable about Struktur is that this idea of community, right? Even this presentation, I mean, I wrote it, but I didn't do it myself. You know, I had other people I was bouncing ideas off of, and I was getting critiques, and I was like, oh, and I had insights that I wouldn't have had, but I was just locked in a room by myself. So community, excellence, that's craft, right? And showing up for the people you love, and caring and trying, right? Compassion and integrity, just the same in every situation. Anyway, these are my top 4. To turn this back to you, and this is the work I had to do, and I feel like this is the work I would challenge you to do, is like, what are your values, right? And when we talk about being dissatisfied, like why, and what's out of harmony with your values that makes it hard for you to be happy. So, and then finally, this is my big one here, is, and I feel like I feel like all designers have a little bit of insecurity and imposter syndrome, but like, I feel like I got this one bad for some reason. I have a really hard time with self-esteem sometimes. So, and a lot of it, to me, I talk just this asshole right here, negative self-talk. It's just like, man, and it's like, I'm sure you've heard people say like, don't believe what you feel all the time, because I feel like a lot of times your feelings are emotional, and they lie to you. Like kind of an asshole, right? Catastrophizing, God, if I don't get this gig, I'm never gonna work again, right? And then worries, past failures, perfectionism. No one here is a perfectionist, I'm sure of it. Nobody who is. Right? And then it's asshole little brother, all or nothing thinking, which is I fall prey to all the time, especially with my ADD. It's like, if I can't do it all at once, right? If I don't think I can do it all at once, then I don't even try. Good idea, Bob, right? Rather than breaking it down into little pieces and something that's actually hey, maybe I only get 3 of these things done, and that's a win for that day, right? So giving yourself. And that goes back to my whole thing about compassion and being compassionate towards yourself, which is a really crazy idea, right? Right? So, so again, I'm going to turn this back to you guys. Like, these really take some time and really chew this up and internalize. Why do you believe this shit that you're telling yourself? And I think about like a friend of mine said, you'd never talk to a friend that way. Why do you talk to yourself that way, right? And really monitor your self-talk. And this is like, what proof do you have this is true? And your friends go, no, you're not really that way, or whatever. But like, really think it through. And again, I think keeping a journal is a great way to approach this. But really spend some time and think these things through. And I love, especially these last few ones. Like, what if you didn't? What if it was the opposite? What if you actually really did believe in yourself? How could your life and your relationships be better by actually believing in yourself? Crazy idea, right? So anyway, that's the big 3 for me: ikigai, values, and self-talk. And here's what I want to. Adrienne calls me kind of a squish monster. But I really, really, really do believe, and it's what I love about this group is. My favorite scene in any movie of all time is the airport scene in Love Actually, where they're all hugging each other and like. I fucking fall for that shit every fucking single time. Because it's like people like loving and hugging. It's the purest expression of human interaction. And it's the opposite of this dark hate and war and fear and all that shit. So I really just like, to me anyway, maybe when you're screaming loud, maybe you're talking to yourself more than anybody else. But like really believe in this stuff. Because you got this. You guys got this. Thanks.